It's a new year. The country called Ghana would be run by a government. It's a continuing government in the second term of the second year of the second term, the Akufo-Addo administration. How did it fare in the first year of the second term? And what is the projection for the second year of the second term? On Face to Face, which is the first edition of this year, that is the conversation we are having. My name is Umaru Sanda Amadu. When we come back, I tell you who my guest is and why he's the best person to answer these questions. You're welcome back to Face on Citi TV. My name is Umaru Sanda Amadu. My guest is a Minister for Information and also Member of Parliament for Ofuasi Ayerbe, Honorable Kojo Oppong Nkrumah. You're welcome to Face.
Thank you, sir.
How are you?
I'm okay.
How is the year starting for you?
It started calmly. I think it's a calm before the storm because we are in a globally difficult time, and this year will have its own difficulties. So this is perhaps a calm before the storm.
Is it the same difficulties of COVID, or there's a different storm that is brewing somewhere that I'm not aware of? Maybe it has reached Ofuasi and it's coming to Accra side.
Well, COVID continues to be a major challenge. I think just this morning I was reading in Turkey, the currency is depreciated.
The lira?
Yes, I think by about 20% or so. Inflation has raised its head in Europe, in America. Supply chain constraints are not necessarily resolved across Asia and other parts of the world. So the economic difficulties that have come with this pandemic still are around. Many countries are exploring ways by which they can exit. So it will have its own difficulties. Here in Ghana, in addition to that, you have increasingly worrying security challenges, which I'm afraid the majority of people are not taking too seriously. And between those, you have things like cost of living, etc., that we all have to contend with. So it will come with its own difficulties, but that's why I say this is probably the calm before the storm. Is
it time we started factoring COVID in our projections, in our budgets and all of that, considering that it has become like a permanent thing for us? It's in its second year and counting.
Yeah, at least for us, this 2022 budget is factored, has mitigated what COVID would do to our projections for development and growth and how much of the government agenda that we can achieve. And I think that for businesses, a lot of people in the private sector who I speak to, they are also factoring in how much COVID is going to affect their top line or their turnover and how much it's also going to add to some unbudgeted cost items there. I think it's a good thing for everybody to factor it into they are planning for the year 2022.
Well, let us focus on 2020 in a bit, but let's reflect on 2021. What did the Akufo-Addo government say was going to do for Ghanaians in 2021? I mean, by 2021 January, you knew there was COVID. So maybe the excuses for COVID would have to reduce a bit. But let's look at the projections you made for 2021 and how those materialized or failed. What are some of the highlights? If someone came from Ecuador and asked you, how did you do last year?
I think first of all, we should not keep repeating the expression excuses from COVID, because the conversation about COVID is not about excuses. It's a reality hitting all over the world. But that's a side matter. 2021, the very first thing the government wanted to do was to get the economy back on track following this literal slowdown because of COVID. COVID came with a lot of hysteria. And initially, governments all over the world were of the view that a 14-day lockdown would be the answer. And I remember very much here in Ghana where people were screaming, lock us down, lock us down. You recall statements from the Ghana Medical Association and other groups creating the impression that the government was not being responsible if it didn't lock us down. And I recall the government decision that a lockdown without more was not the answer. You needed to, if you would do a lockdown, use it as an opportunity to understand the dynamics of the virus and how it would play up. But the consequence of that for all economies that locked down, even for longer times than Ghana, is that growth slowed down, hardships increased, poverty increased, supply chains were constrained, and therefore the day-to-day lives of people, which will bring in incomes to them as individuals, to households, to businesses, and to governments, were all slowed down and constrained. At the same time, costs went up. If you fell sick, you needed to spend more money. If you were quarantining, if you needed to provide some support because the general economic activity wasn't going up, you needed to spend more. So economic difficulties were rife. So in 2021, the number one objective of government was to get the Ghanaian economy back onto a moving gear without compromising people's health. I think looking at how the year ended, it ended way better than how 2020 ended. It did not end where we would have all preferred, looking at the targets, let's say government targets or corporate targets, but it was better than how 2020 ended, because we were able to achieve the twin objectives of protecting people's lives, but also ensuring that livelihoods were not unnecessarily constrained. That was one of the major things government was looking at in 2021. Another thing government was looking at in 2021 was to successfully hold back the increasing advance of terrorists onto our northern frontiers. And as I've hinted earlier, it is one of the things that really worries many of us in government a lot, that it does not appear that the entire Ghanaian ecosystem has recognized how much of a risk we are facing and has not mainstreamed the response to it. On the government side, you would have noticed, I'm sure you paid attention, you'd have noticed a lot of investment into logistics for the security agencies, putting what I may loosely call forward operating bases up in the north to ensure that intelligence, personnel, and logistics were available, particularly on the borders and within the relevant communities, and by so doing ensure that that risk does not materialize in terms of attacks here in the Ghanaian jurisdiction. We have attained some successes in that area, particularly in the areas of intelligence gathering and intelligence sharing that has enabled us, may I say, mitigate what could have otherwise been a more difficult year for us security-wise. But there's a lot more that we need to do in that area. Also in the year 2021, you would have seen that one of our flagship, or two of our flagship programs, which I think occupy the top of the perch, the program to ensure that every Ghanaian child gets access to quality, affordable education, the Free Senior High School program, rolled out a lot of infrastructure projects in terms of classroom blocks, in terms of dormitory blocks, because you recall that 2019-2020, after we had introduced free SHS, one of the major gaps showed up very significantly, which was the gap in infrastructure, leading to the conversation of congestion, etc. And that's why a lot of work within that 48-month period, that 24-month period was concentrated on ensuring that we're able to beef up infrastructure. It was something that we think we were able to, deliver pretty well. If you put these top three things together, including other infrastructure works, particularly in the area of roads, I think you will come to the conclusion that some of the top items on government's priority list, we were successful in containing them. I'll
come and ask you which ones you failed to deliver, because if there is a success, then there should be a failure somewhere. But let's tie up a few of the things you've raised. So recovering or making the economy recover was your main focus for last year. For many people, recovering would include commerce, trade, interstate trade. We have reopened the border. We did not close the ports at the harbor or the seaports, but we still have the land borders closed. For many, the business that we make or we do with Togo is something that keeps that part of the country moving, and yet you've locked them down. And Elubo, the same thing is happening. For close to 2 years now, for a government that wants to have the economy on a recovery footing, that should be something you should be focused on. Why haven't you touched that?
Well, we are focused on it. We must start off by saying that the borders are not closed to cargo traffic. The borders are closed to human traffic. Of course, and admittedly, cargo traffic will come in with some limited amount of human beings. But what that does is that it helps us to limit the risk of importation of the virus. Now, bear in mind, all of these interventions we are rolling out are supposed to help us mitigate the risk of importation. They will not eliminate it, but they are supposed to help us mitigate. Think back. It took 2 cases of COVID in Ghana to get us to the hundreds of thousands where we are now and the number of deaths that we've unfortunately suffered. So any responsible government will start off by working to mitigate the risk of importation. By closing the borders to human traffic and not cargo traffic, we allow as much of commerce that must come and go, and indeed commerce comes and goes between these borders, but we are able to mitigate the natural human traffic that would have also been flowing even without the commerce. There is a truth in your question that there are also people who are just traders across the borders, and they may not necessarily be coming with a lot of cargo, but as individuals going in and out and doing their business.
Carrying on their head. Or...
Absolutely. And that is also constrained by this intervention that we have had to introduce. It is an intervention that we are not necessarily happy about. All of these restrictions that we've had to impose are restrictions that we are not necessarily thrilled or delighted in introducing. But the president's words remain true, that we have to protect lives first, and then livelihoods.
But when, you see, when
we
you
continue, if I just may, we continue to examine what needs to be put in place to allow us to open the land borders. It will require a lot of testing infrastructure along the entire circumference of the Ghanaian borderline, and a multiplication of what we are doing at Kotoka across all of these points. And it is something that the Ghana Health Service and the task force on COVID continues to examine. In fact, this morning at 10 o'clock, we had a meeting, virtual and real. I joined virtually, where the question of the borders keeps coming up, and the level of preparation that must be completed satisfactorily before we do that keeps coming up. We unfortunately are not at that point where we can confidently say we can have all of this infrastructure in place and open up, but we hope to get there as soon as possible.
When you imposed a lockdown, was it 2 weeks or so in April or May last year, you said you were imposing that lockdown, and this is what the health experts said, that we want to learn the behavior of the virus so we can react.
Virus, yes.
I think if you did the same for the borders and you locked for 2 years and you still cannot learn the behavior of the border, the virus to be able to open the border, then it's a bit problematic.
No, the two are different things. A lockdown, like what we did in Greater Accra and Greater Kumasi, yes, during which period people could not move, generally, is different from the closure of the borders. The border towns have not been locked down. People can move in and around Aplao and also in Lomé, but what is happening is that the crossing of the border, like somebody entering Ghana through the airport, is what is precluded currently, because primarily COVID is getting into the jurisdiction by persons who are traveling in, and then you have what they call community spread following from that. And if we look at the data from across the sub-region, the risk is still very high in some of our neighboring countries. What we need to do is not necessarily to, I think, question the wisdom in the closure of the borders to human traffic, but is to focus a lot more attention on how we can hasten the interventions that will allow us to open.
So for the people
borders.
watching us there who want to be able to move into Asigame and do business, what do you say to them? Should they expect the reopening anytime soon based on the meetings?
I think they should expect that sooner than later, those borders will be opened once the infrastructure is put in place to allow.
But is that infrastructure being installed currently?
Installed, I can't say yes, but the various, may I say, types and considerations that come with the costs that are acceptable. Even look at what happened at the airport. There are still complaints today about the cost involved, etc. But when you select a particular option, it comes with cost, which cost will then be passed on to the everyday Ghanaian who is transiting across these borders. All of those considerations are ongoing. My expectation is that sooner than later it will be completed so that our brothers and sisters who need to move across those borders can get across those borders, but can also do it safely. There's
another argument that by closing the border, you are promoting corruption, because we are told many of the people who live in the border towns are having to pay bribes and bribe officials. And this would be immigration officials, customs officials, military personnel. And these are allegations. I cannot independently prove them, but we're told that this is what happens continually. So you may have locked it because you don't want the virus to come in, but the virus has been riding on Zemi's motorbike in and out every day.
If that is true, that will be the unfortunate manifestation of our own tendencies living across these borders to do some of these things, even when the state is trying to protect our very lives. But that will not take away the well-grounded intentions for which this is being done, and the need to hasten the efforts to install infrastructure that allows us to open it up. And I think anybody who makes a call on government that hasten the efforts to install that infrastructure will be making a call in the right direction.
Let's look at things that you may have failed in, and I'll ask you to make concessions or tell me things you plan to do but you failed. But let me remind you of one, which is to vaccinate 20 million of the population. Yeah. That you failed to do.
We did not meet that target. I think before the end of the year, the president in his Forbes interview acknowledged that we will not meet that target, but it was a good thing to have such a high target, and it was also a good thing to, based on that target, work so strongly to achieve the numbers that we achieved. I can check the latest numbers by the time this program is airing. But first of all, the supply chain constraints that I've spoken about still exist, more so even in the area of COVID vaccines, the production of which is limited to just a small assembly of companies. There's also been a lot of hoarding by countries that otherwise had the resources to even pay ahead of time when the clinical trials, etc., were ongoing. But even be that as it may, I think the government of Ghana has done pretty well through diplomatic and other channels to secure millions of those vaccines for us. In fact, in December, we were now kicking up the requirement for people to take up the vaccines because we had a good stock of vaccines in town. So 20 million, no, but it was good to have such an audacious target, and that spurred us on to get the stocks that we got in and to achieve the successes we've achieved so far. In this January, there's talk of mandatory vaccination before you can access some public entities. I know it's been announced already. It is a subject of consideration even at today's meeting that I'm speaking to you about, because we still have a good chunk of vaccines have not expired and we need a lot more people to take it up. It's a demand and supply thing. So supply is very significant. Now we need to collectively work up on demand so that we can achieve that.
Are you going to force people to be vaccinated, or are you going to beg people? Are you going to use the carrot or the stick?
I think we should use both. The Public Health Act allows in circumstances like this for mandates of this nature to be introduced. That is what you may call a stick. But we should also continue to use moral suasion and public education and get people to understand that it is in your own interest and in the interest of your loved ones so that you get
So let's look at your failures. What would you say after so you say you did a retreat after 2021 and then the president is sitting, you have a mini cabinet or something, and says, Charlie, which ones did we fail in? Which concessions have been made by which sectors?
I like the way you put it. So you see, in a mini cabinet, the oath of secrecy applies.
Okay, let's make it an expanded cabinet.
It doesn't matter. It's still a cabinet meeting, but I get your point.
So promises you made to the population that you would say, well, based on ABCD, like the vaccine, for instance, you admit that you couldn't meet it.
But if there are any specifics that you want to draw,
I want to get a confession. I don't want to put anything to you.
I am happy to highlight the things that we succeeded at. If there are any specifics that you want to draw my attention to, I'll be happy to concede anything that we were unable to achieve.
You did not do an inflection to say that in 2020?
We have, but that's why I told you that for internal purposes we've done that. If there's any specific, I don't have a challenge.
Is it not fair to say to the people who you promised that, we said we're going to do A, B, C, D for you. We managed to do A, B, but we are left with C.
It is fair.
And so give us
I've given
this
you
year,
an
we're
example
going to work
of,
on
for example, the vaccination
which is
program.
what I proposed.
If there are any others draw my attention, I'll be happy to speak to them.
Okay. Is that to mean that you believe you've done 100%?
No, we believe that within the constraints of resources, supply chain, global challenges, we've been able to deliver adequately to the satisfaction of the average Ghanaian. If there are specifics, I'm happy to take on those specifics.
Were you able to deliver the hospitals you promised?
Yes, we started the Agenda 111
How many
program.
have you built?
Well, but the building is not an event. It's not a one-day event.
Yeah, you gave us a year.
I saw. Yes, it's supposed to be 12 to 18 months for the completion of civil works, and then you will have the installation of equipment. It's not even been 8 months since
8
work
months
started.
is a significant period.
No, I'm just saying that it's not
months.
been. So it is not something that we're expected to have completed by 31st December. No, that's not the scenario. I think that, for example, when we get to that timeline and we have not met that timeline, it will be a genuine cause for concern for all of us, even in government and outside government. But to answer your question, within the constraint of the resources available, global challenges, etc., we believe that we've delivered adequately on what was
But in
us.
instances where we're told nothing has been done on the ground, it's difficult to believe that project will be executed within the period you talk about. Because on that day when you went to, is it Trader? Is that the name of the town? And you did that. You said that it's supposed to happen simultaneously across the country. But our checks have shown that not all the places.
I led the press briefing on that. We were very clear. We said that upon commencement, it's going to take about 12 to 18 months to finish civil works.
Good.
What it means is that if Trader has commenced, and I just saw videos of Trader, I think about 2 days ago, my good friend Yamin went there and took some videos. And I saw ongoing works. I saw ongoing
yes,
works.
that is one.
Now, no, so for the ones that have commenced, and I'm sure after today's meeting was on health and including Agenda 111, part of the discussion is to update the country on where we are in terms of that project. When we do that update, you will see the progress of work on places where commencement has taken place. Places where commencement has not taken place will also be clear enough to let the country know that these contractors have been paid but haven't moved to site, or these ones have not been paid at all.
So there are places you haven't, that has not started yet?
Yes, there are places that have not started.
Are there many of you?
We'll provide all of that update when we do that update to the country. But there are places where contractors are also on site. And so it is the balance of that update that will help Ghanaians form a certain view whether or not government is serious about this project. But I think on that specific matter, one of the things that we need to get very clearly, even as a government, is to ensure that the resources for the project are available. We cannot afford to have an instance where resources are not made available, which would then make it impossible for the project to take place. The project is not really an engineering challenge. It is actually a financing need. Once the financing is available, the project management professionals know how to do this. So we as a government have the responsibility to ensure that funding does not become a challenge for this project.
This is Face to Face on Citi TV. My guest is the Minister for Information, Kojo Oppong Nkrumah. We're having a conversation on 2021 and 2022. When we come back, employment is a key issue. How has that been dealt with and how would it be dealt with? And of course, we'll talk about the rancor in Parliament and how the executive is going to win the legislature over for business to be done. Don't worry.
Citi TV is live on DSTV. Go to channel 363. On GoTV, access Citi TV on channel 182. On a digital TV, please press the menu button on the remote control and run a new search on your TV. Take note that without an antenna, you cannot access Citi TV on your television. Citi TV can be accessed on a free-to-air digital box like the GoTV and StarTimes box. Citi TV, it's your world.
You're welcome back to Face on Citi TV. My name is Umaru Sanda Amadu and my guest is the Minister for Information, Kojo Oppong Nkrumah. Your manifesto for 2016, the one that won you power, was an agenda for job, and you tried to build on that over the past 5 years. Now, COVID was there. Some companies have to lay off workers. There were other ways of absorbing workers and so on. Virtual became the way of the day, the order of the day and so on. But of course, because you had promised that you're going to deliver jobs, you had to deliver jobs because people would be hungry. Tell us about your 2021 story in terms of employment.
Let me expand it a little bit and also put it in context, because I think, as for numbers, we can throw some numbers and somebody will dispute it and we don't go anywhere. But let's look at it in a bigger context. For jobs to be created, the theory and the practice shows us that two main things must happen. The public sector must have evidence of opening up to accommodate some numbers. And more importantly, the private sector must also be experiencing growth. Whenever you see the economy move from 2% to 4% or 3% to 6%, that means the economy is expanding, and consequent to that expansion is an opening up of the economic space that comes with jobs and incomes for people. That's the general theory and practice. In fact, on the public sector side, you must be wary of a situation where workers are being furloughed or are being laid off. So take 2017 to 2020. I'll give you two basic things. One, nobody can dispute the levels of economic growth between 2017 and 2020. So you saw how we took an economy from, 3.1, 3.4%, and did an average of 7% to it. Even if you are not an economist, it is clear to you that economic activity is picking up. This expansion that is mostly coming with private sector jobs. Those numbers, the employment ministry may put it out. There will be a big public debate. I've been in this business for a while, but that is the fact. Number two, you also want to ask yourself, what about the public sector? Are you in a scenario where public sector workers are being furloughed or are being retrenched? So again, look at the evidence. From 2014 to 2016, we had a system where, because of fiscal imprudence, we had to first go for an IMF bailout, which came with conditions including the non-recruitment of public sector workers except for essential services. So nobody can convince us, because every Ghanaian is available to see the facts, that between 2014 and 2016, you were, for example, seeing tens of thousands of young men and women lining up for jobs in the police service or the military or the prison services. But you notice that post-2017, when the new administration got us out of the IMF program and started the expansion in public sector recruitment, the public sector recruitment is why you are seeing young men and women on the streets lining up, going for body checks. The public sector recruitment is the reason for which you are seeing those who used to go and sleep at the forecourt of the health ministry. And I recall when we came to power in 2017, people at the forecourt of the health ministry asking for clearance to be recruited. Gradually, you are seeing all of those ones come down. So there's evidence. People may dispute it, may have their own shock jock opinions about it, but there's evidence that the public sector is expanding to accommodate a lot more Ghanaians. And I get calls literally on a daily basis. Honorable, I've bought forms for immigration and prisons. Can you please speak to somebody? I say, it's a computerized system. I can't help you in that particular area. But that is evidence that today there's an opening up and people are getting
That's
in.
evidence that people
Also
are unemployed
today,
and want to get in by force.
Absolutely.
And tens of thousands, like
absolutely.
you said,
But compare it.
No.
There was a time.
I'm
There
not
was
sure
a
if you want,
time.
how are you going to compare? Because the videos of 2021 are scary.
Yeah.
The one at the Babayara Sports
tells
Stadium.
You the pile
the
up.
one at the 37 Elwak area.
It tells you the pile up of young men.
Oh, so you're saying that it is the freezing of 2017 that is eventually showing in 2021?
I'm saying
that's
that
fact,
job
that's
creation is a continuum. If you have a scenario where
no, but we saw the people in 2021, not 2017, not 2018, not 2019.
You have forgotten that between 2017 and 2020, we had to, for example, introduce the NAPCO program.
Yes.
That sucked in, about 100, even these recruitments that you are talking about, it's not up to 20,000.
The people we saw in the videos.
It's not up
people
to
who have lined up like they're going to watch a football match, filling up the
recruitments in the security services.
Yes.
It's not up to 20,000.
For all of them, for military, for police, for immigration.
Check the numbers for the financial clearance. Yeah. The recruitments are not up to 20,000. I'm saying.
No, I'm not talking about the recruitment. I'm talking about the applicants.
Yes, I'm coming. I'm saying that you saw a larger number between 2017 and 2020 when we opened up NAPCO and were able to absorb 100,000 in a single day. Of course, when you have done that, unemployment is not zero in this country. So you will still have a certain residual. And of course, there are people who are coming into the bracket. So my argument is this. If you look at it side by side, between 2017 and now, or 2017 and 2020, there has been an improvement in the public sector space to accommodate people. The growth in the economy is clear evidence of improvement in opportunity for people to expand in the private sector and create more jobs. Is it enough? Is it zero? No.
Okay, so that's the point.
We have to, yes, but...
So the Mahama IMF thing, you have found a way of fixing it over 4 years.
Yes,
good.
But the foundation must be laid.
Yeah, but my point is
if I just may land on that
yes,
one, the foundation must be laid that this is where we are. Do we need to do more? Absolutely, yes. We need to do a lot more to ensure that the public sector is not over bloated, but is able to accommodate as much as it can, and that's why you continue. In fact, just before Christmas, I received my letter for financial clearance on people to recruit in my sector. I do know of other...
Prepare, you're going to get a lot of applicants after this interview.
It's okay.
Since you have announced publicly.
No, this is fact. They'll go through the Public Service Commission processes because I think there must be fairness and equity in how these things are done. But my point is this. It also happens across other sectors of the economy. Okay. Additionally, you are now seeing growth pick up. If you had a scenario where growth was coming down from 14% in 2011 down to 3.4, that is not a job-creating economy. But a scenario where growth is picked up from 3.4, averaging about 7% and picking up, is a relatively better scenario. Is it enough? No. So what we need to do is to ensure that there's more aggressive growth in the private sector so that a lot more people can get absorbed.
So the job-creating economy is the one that showed us horrible or horrifying footage of the conference center where the YEA was holding its job fair. It looked like a rally of a political party. And if you add that to the recruitments by the immigration and the other services, and I believe they would have recruited just 10% of that population or less, that is a horrifying scene to think that we have so many people out there, unemployed graduates on the street. And this is outside the nurses who are asking.
Yes.
As recently,
it shows you the size of the problem.
Yeah, so I'm saying that the problem, we've already known about it. You've given us one of the reasons being the IMF restrictions. But we moved away from those restrictions.
I've given you two reasons.
Yes.
I've told you that the IMF restrictions created a constraint in the public sector.
Yes.
And the dwindling growth from about 14% to 3% even created further restrictions in the private sector.
That, but
now,
5 years.
Both have moved forward. So you notice that there's more room in the public sector to recruiting, and there's even more room in the private sector looking at the performance of the Ghanaian economy. But I also make the point to you that it's not zero. It doesn't mean that 100%
it's a room. I'm not saying.
Has been solved.
Okay, so I'm not saying it should be 100%.
Are you saying that all of these people who are getting jobs in the security services, you are not seeing it?
No, I saw the people who came to line up, and I know that based on the official communication.
The demand,
but they were not picked up.
I'm coming. The demand is more than the supply. It's an equilibrium thing. Fancy a situation where you had no supply. That demand will still be existent. Today you have supply.
Do you have figures of the supply? How much was supplied? I'm not sure. Maybe we didn't plan.
Well, I mean, I've told that we can fetch those numbers from the employment ministry. But just take a minute. Take the supply side of the equation and take the scenario where there was no supply. Those were the days when you had the Unemployed Graduate Association and all of those ones. Where supply, we were told supply.
That was just a name. Doesn't mean they are not in existence now.
Are you telling me that organized, energized body did not exist?
No, there was just a body.
No, Sanda, I don't believe
you. Are you suggesting?
I don't want to believe you are saying
no,
this.
I am, and I can explain my point.
We all lived in this country.
Yes, Honourable Minister.
We all lived in this country.
And we had an Unemployed Graduate Association.
We saw those ones existed.
We
have also seen what happened, for example, with the IMF tabs on public sector recruitment and all of that. I'm saying that the evidence is clear today that those things have improved. But I'm also conceding. You said you wanted a confession. I'm also conceding. I'm also conceding to you that it's not 100%. Our focus, in my view, respectfully, is not necessarily to deny the reality that we all saw. But our focus ought to be on, okay, so how do we multiply this for a lot more people to benefit? And I think that's where we need to put our efforts and our energies.
So what I am having a difficulty understanding is, are you suggesting that the sheer numbers we saw on the street shows that you are recruiting them? Well, I'm not sure those people...
If you were not recruiting, how will you have those numbers going to a point in search of what? It is because
no, but you are asking for 5 people and 100,000 people show up.
You have asked the question. Let me answer.
Explain, sir.
If you had an administration that asked for 0 people, or said, I'm not a magician, so I can't give you jobs, or that the IMF says I should not recruit, on one side, and you have another administration that, even in accordance with your own analogy, said, okay, I've been able to create room for 5 people. You're telling me that 0 is better than 5?
Okay.
So my point is this. The demand, the sheer demand, is obviously higher than the supply. But the supply has significantly improved from where it was in the beginning. Our focus ought not to be on, has the supply increased or not? No, our focus has to be on moving forward. How do we ensure that there is enough supply to meet the upcoming demand? We have said, for example, that by 2024, if the current demand and supply trends for jobs continue, there will be about 6 million Ghanaians who will be out of school looking for work. And it is important to today start exercises to ensure that they are capacitated to be of economic value to themselves and to others.
So that's a very scary figure.
And that is why, for example, in this year's budget, we have introduced the U-Start program. We've made available 1 billion Ghana cedis, unprecedented in our history, to support an entrepreneurial drive so that the private sector expansion, which for me is the 80% of the 80-20 game, can be hastened. So for me, our focus, our energies, our attention must be on, now we've seen it clearly that there's one administration that does comparatively better when it comes to expanding the economy and creating room in the public sector as compared to the other. We don't have to have a debate about it. But how do we even get the administration that is doing well, the MPP administration, to do better than what it has done? I think that's what we have to do.
What you are saying now is very close, but not the same as what the president said.
Which is?
He blamed the former government for the problems of today. The man who headed the last government went to 31st December Revolution, a place that you would not particularly like to remember, but he went there and said that, stop blaming me for everything. I left office 5 years ago. Why is the president, not your president, our president, still blaming the former president 5 years on?
If you ask me, why is there such a high demand for jobs today? I'll have no option than to tell you the truth. That look first to the antecedents. And I've had the opportunity to tell you about the management of the economy, the IMF, the slowdown in private sector expansion, and how that culminated in a huge backlog. The interventions we have introduced, 100,000 under NAPCO, public service, recruitment, expansion in the private sector of the economy, and still come forward and tell you that, but there's still the need and room to do a lot more. If you want to interpret that as blaming the former administration, I think that that's political categorization for an end in itself. I'm really not excited or interested in that. I am interested in what do we do to move the dial further? Because now it is obvious that I told you, there's one administration that gets the economy running, that gets the public sector recruiting, and that administration at the same time can even find excess resources to do social protection programs, if I may land. The debate is not about Mahama says this and Akufo-Addo says no. The debate is now that we are clear that the MPP administration is better at this job, and we're even demanding more of the MPP administration, what are the practical measures that the MPP administration has to achieve more? And that's why I'm telling you that, for example, if you look in this year's budget, there is an unprecedented 1 billion Ghana cedis to support youth enterprise. Instead of having a debate about what Mr. Mahama said in response to the facts, I would rather be interested in having a conversation about, so what is the rollout program for YouStart? Okay. How do people across the country benefit? How do the first 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people benefit? I think that's what moves us forward.
Okay, if we agree, and it is for that reason that the Mahama government lost the power in 2016, that it was mediocre, and 5 years into office, you are comparing to this mediocrity.
We are not comparing to mediocrity. You asked me.
You are, because you're saying that at the time this is what they were doing. You have come and you have...
You asked me...
But people want to see...
You asked me the cause of the problem. If you don't want the answer...
No, people want to see you fix the issue.
And we are fixing it.
And stop reflecting and talking about it.
If you don't want the answer...
No, it's always like comparing to your ex.
If you don't want the answer...
People don't want you to be comparing to the ex.
If you don't want the answer, don't ask the question. No, if you ask me what is the cause, I have to tell you the fact. If you don't want that answer...
No, I'm not asking what the cause. I'm asking how you're fixing the problem.
No, if you ask me... No, but that's not the question.
No, my problem is that how we have so many people on the road
if you ask
who have come to queue
how
to
we
ask
are
for
fixing
jobs,
the problem.
And you're saying it's because of an IMF freeze.
How we are fixing the problem.
Yes.
I will go into the details of the YouStart program. You are fixated on what Mr. Mahama said. When did you say he said it?
No, I did not.
No, you raised 31st December,
etc. The president, the man
I have not spoken about Mr. Mahama. I haven't spoken about his administration in the context of that. I am speaking to you about what we are doing in 2022 to create jobs. And I've hinted 3 times. The YouStart program provides an unprecedented one. Because you asked the question about what. Do we want to do this for the rest of the term?
No, we're not going to do this.
So let's put it aside and move forward. You asked me a question, I've answered. The YouStart program, for example.
Let me give you some quick information before we go to YouStart.
You don't want to talk about the YouStart program?
YouStart is futuristic. You've hammered...
But that is where we should be going.
We're going to go there now. But you've hammered a lot on NAPCO. Yes. And I just need to give you some information that for the past 3 months, the NAPCO beneficiaries have not been paid their allowances. The 700 cedis you said you were going to give to them. And they are frustrated. Initially, you terminated their contract, and then you came with an announcement that they should continue.
They were not terminated.
Well, the contract naturally terminated.
The program was a 3-year program which came to an end.
And they were told
a good number of them made a very strong argument that an extension would be good. That extension has been given, and during this new fiscal year, our expectation is that they can also be migrated onto other public sector and private sector entities. It's unfortunate that the 3-month delay has been occasioned, but we are optimistic that that can be cleared and they'll be having the opportunity to complete this final extended year that they are in and migrate onto the public and to the private sector schemes. But are you honestly telling me that the previous system, where all of these persons were at home, is the preferred option?
What is the use of extending my contract and not paying me for 3 months and having me chop Christmas in an empty pocket?
You will be paid.
When?
Let's not get...
They are in my inbox. They are on our timeline. They are harassing me. They are saying that they need to be paid.
I know some of them personally. They're not in my inbox. I meet some of them personally. I speak to them personally. I feel the challenge maybe more or equally like you feel it. But
I'm not sure you feel, because they didn't celebrate Christmas.
I am a member of parliament. I have NAPCO personally in my constituency. I meet them. I'm saying that I feel it directly. And I'm saying to you that it is something, it's a challenge that needs to be quickly dealt with. And then moving forward, that 1-year extension in terms of payments, etc., can be regularized. And then more importantly, the expansion of the economy to accommodate these and other persons can also be occasional.
Let's talk about getting money to run the government, which is what you are planning to do. And you have a lot of ambitious plans you want to roll out this year. You need that little devil called E-Levy. The House of Parliament has shut it down. What are you going to do as a
No,
government?
the House of Parliament hasn't shut it down. Let's not misinform the public.
Okay, who shut
Parliament, Parliament hasn't shut it down. Parliament has
really?
not even taken the vote on it.
Yes.
These things that we say, people pick it up and then they go away with it. Investors listen to it.
Okay.
And they make investor decisions based on these ones. So,
Since you're going on that, let me make the point before you clarify.
Let's be fair with the facts.
Yes, so the fact is that the Speaker of Parliament sat and presided over a House that rejected the budget.
The House didn't reject the budget.
The House rejected the
budget.
budget.
The House did not reject the budget.
The Speaker of
the
Parliament...
Speaker made a pronouncement per curiam. 137 members of Parliament. You think one Supreme Court judge can go and sit at the Supreme Court without any processes before him and make a pronouncement that he has taken a decision on a matter?
One High Court judge can.
No, he cannot. There's procedure in this country.
Yes.
There are the High Court civil procedure rules. There are the rules of court. They all apply.
Honorable.
At the same time, some of these things, we misinform the public.
No, I am not going to.
You are.
No,
Parliament
let me put this record.
Never rejected the 2022 budget. The Speaker made a pronouncement per curiam. Parliament properly constituted, corrected it.
You sat.
The Speaker came back. The Speaker came back and said he had a proposal. You notice that both sides of the divide did not even comment on Mr. Speaker's proposal.
Yes, that's what I was going to say to you.
He went ahead. So let's not repeat
No,
this thing that the budget was rejected. It was not
officially,
rejected.
the Speaker...
It was not rejected. Let's move on to the substantive issues.
The Speaker... You see, this is... when the Speaker returned,
yes,
he said what happened was an error. You were in the House of Parliament.
Was that a ruling?
Yeah, in reference to...
It wasn't a ruling.
In reference,
Mr. Speaker said... Mr. Speaker...
He delivered a speech.
Well, so how does a speech...
I'm saying that when he made that statement in the House and said what happened in his absence was an error, but he was going to let it slide.
Mr. Speaker allows errors to slide?
Well,
please, let's not misinform
you sat there, you heard what he read.
Yes, and
I'm saying
that
you didn't challenge him. Nobody challenged him.
The majority leader, the minority leader.
That has been reported and that holds.
Mr. Speaker's statement, Mr. Speaker's speech is not a ruling. Let's be very clear on that.
Okay, but what is it?
In fact, he said he was reading communication from the Speaker. Check the Hansard of the day.
So how relevant is that
It's
communication?
like a statement read on the floor by a member of Parliament.
It carries no weight.
It carries the weight of a statement. It is not a ruling. We have to be very clear about that. If the Supreme Court justices make a statement in passing or express an opinion on a matter, it does not amount to the ruling of the Supreme Court on a matter. Let's be very clear about it. And that is why the record must be clear. The budget was not rejected.
Okay.
Appropriation in the end was passed by the House. One of the revenue measures, which amounts to what? About 7 billion out of 145 billion. Check the math. 7 billion out of 145 billion.
Very, very insignificant.
Already 138 billion has been approved. 7 billion of it is yet to be decided on by the House. The last time we attempted to do it, the House dissolved into a very, very, very embarrassing and disappointing spectacle. We in the majority took a decision that it would not be wise to keep going forward, knowing the kind of challenge that we were having. And so we were of the view that it's important to suspend until everybody, including Mr. Speaker, was in his seat so that we can proceed with that. And that's where we are. We have a budget, we have an appropriations act that has been passed, we have about 138 billion of the inflows secured. The other about 7 billion is what we'll be working on moving forward when Parliament reconvenes. In
your plan to impose the hard E-Levy on us, you also compensated us by removing the toll booths.
Yeah.
The tolls are not generating revenue.
Yeah.
And yet you're also not getting the E-Levy that you were hoping you would get.
Yeah.
Are we not losing revenue as a result?
Revenue losses in this country, if you chose to go into them, are in a wide breadth. And every single one of them, somebody can argue, matters. But the revenue question in this country, in my view, respectfully, is bigger than are we not losing 7 million cedis from the road tolls.
Well, if you add the 7 billion to it, that's 7.7.
Well, so then you can add all of them. The challenge you have in this country is that you are living in a country where legitimately Ghanaians are demanding things of their government. The government has only two ways of responding to those demands. You either borrow or you raise domestic revenue. We are at a point where our debt to GDP ratio is close to about 80% thereabout. it is not healthy for us to go further on that front. So do we cut the expectations of the Ghanaian and say, like some presidents said in times past, I'm not a magician, I don't have any money, I can't do it? Or do we say, how can we respectfully raise some more money from among ourselves so that we can deliver more on that, while at the same time cutting down on excess expenditure or unwarranted expenditure and plugging the loopholes? The government has chosen the latter, that will raise some more revenue while plugging out the excess expenditure and some of the loopholes in the system. The revenue generating measures, since I started following politics from, what was it, the 1990s?
In the early 80s?
No, in the 1990s, have never been an exciting thing for the Ghanaian people. Never. From Kumi Prekun to talk time tax from the Akufo administration, you would always find the political class playing the game of hypocrisy, where those in power say is the best thing we need at this point in time, and those in opposition say is the worst thing you can do at this point in time. And the moment power switches hands,
it reverts.
The people who said it was bad now say it's good, and the people who say it's good now say it's bad. I think that the political class has to stop the hypocrisy when it comes to revenue measures, because we all know that without confronting the revenue question, neither of us can fully develop this country to its full potential. So we've got to stop the hypocrisy when it comes to revenue measures and confront the real issues and tell the Ghanaian people the truth. What we must do is to ensure that when revenues are raised, people are held accountable for it. I have heard people say that this E-Levy bill, you know what, earmark its usage. Say, for example, that 50% of it is going to the roads fund. Label every road that is done with
E-Levy road.
E-Levy road. And publish on an annual basis a report of all the roads and contractors who have been paid with the E-Levy. I think those are brilliant suggestions. I think those are brilliant suggestions. Okay. But for somebody to come and say, no, let's not raise revenue because 1.75% is going to be charged on
your phone.
Yeah, your phone. I think we are not being honest with the Ghanaian people. If you did mobile money transaction of 3,000 cedis a month, you pay 52 cedis. Is this what we are saying will collapse the industry and the economy? I'll give you a last example: the talk time tax. And I recall, because I was
you were
keen.
A host of a morning show at the time.
I was keen in journalism at the time. They said the industry will collapse. People won't talk again. If you talk, they will tax you.
Serial callers cannot call into the SMS. You
know what happened? The people who said it was a bad idea, when they came to power, they made a law around the talk time tax on how to ring fence it into JIDA and NYEP, etc., etc. Where was the integrity in those arguments? Even we, let me be bold enough to say, even we, who made arguments about Kumi Preko in the past, we didn't remove that when we came to power. And so the political class has to stop playing with the Ghanaian people when it comes to revenue measures. Because without confronting it, we are doing what, 12% of GDP? And the countries that we aspire to become, like, they are doing 25%, 30% of GDP. So we have to confront the realities. But we have to hold people accountable when revenues are raised and put it to the uses.
I love this, your speech. It's almost close to what the Speaker gave in the House, except that the effect is still a statement.
Absolutely.
But my point is that I just wanted to remind you that there was a time a tax was put on condoms and cutlasses and you went to town on it.
And we removed it when we came to power.
So
we removed it.
Yeah, but it's a revenue generation measure.
We removed it because...
I'm just trying to remind you that was a generation... We were generating revenue at the time.
And
they thought it was a smart thing to do.
We were true to it. Yes. We removed it when we came to power.
So maybe they are
and
also...
that is why I'm saying that the hypocrisy is what must stop. Because revenue generation is something we must confront. Revenue generation doesn't mean that then you say that...
So for them, they are seeing your tax now as a nuisance tax, as you labeled it. That's what I just wanted to tell you.
Let me take a break but I speak to them.
Yes, let me take a break
and I know that there are many of them who concede that this is a necessary revenue measure, not a nuisance one.
This is Face to Face on Citi TV. It's not a nuisance show. It's not a nuisance television show. Please keep watching us. I'll be back to wrap up with the Honorable Minister for information. This is Face to Face. Don't worry.
Citi TV is live on DSTV. Go to channel 363. On GoTV, access Citi TV on channel 182. On a digital TV, please press the menu button on the remote control and run a news search on your TV. Take note that without an antenna, you cannot access Citi TV on your television. Citi TV can be accessed on a free-to-air digital box like the GoTV and StarTimes box. Citi TV, it's your world.
You're welcome back. Since we returned to Constitutional Rule in 92, we haven't had a president, finish his term. Not all the presidents have finished their terms. So Rawlings finished his term 96-2000. Kufuor finished his term 2005-2008. Atta Mills, unfortunately, God made him finish his term earlier than he had planned. John Mahama was truncated short.
Oh, he did. He finished his 4 year
term. Who finished? Did he not?
4 years. He finished it.
Oh, how? That cannot be his
No, because the
constitutional
8 years
term.
is not a given. No. 8 years is not a given.
You
have a 4-year term.
Oh, no problem. Let's
you have a 4-year term.
Fine.
And he finished it.
Okay.
I keep telling you to be accurate.
Honorable Minister, you are impugning on
No. That's just on the lighter side.
Let the people know that you are. This is a
that
joke.
is just on the lighter side.
Before
Go
they
ahead.
take me to town and say that you haven't. I don't want a repetition of what you did to some journalists.
Go ahead.
I know you have a pension.
I withdraw.
For attacking people who you used to work with.
I withdraw.
No problem. Akufo-Addo is in his last term.
Yes.
He cannot and will not, and he has said that he will not.
He doesn't
even have to say. He cannot do anything about it. He's going to go home.
Yeah.
Is this the stage we call him a lame duck president?
I think for those who try to define that to mean a president whose possible terms are coming to an end, and therefore in whose term the center of gravity of power begins to shift.
They are correct.
They may say so.
Is that why he's singing I Don't Care and he wants to shower
in
the air?
He's never sung I Don't Care. He's never showered in the air.
He's planning to shower in the air.
Not
he
doing
can't be bothered
that.
about anything.
You see, this is what you do, and then when I come back at you, you say I'm attacking.
Okay, then you can come back.
He is not showered in the air. He's not planning to shower in the air.
You're planning to buy a new presidential jet.
This is a president whose agenda for this second term is quite clear and is keen on executing. I've never seen a harder working president, even at this age.
Are you sure?
I'm telling you. Tell me the last president at this age who was so hard working, literally crisscrossing the country on a daily. As I'm speaking to you now, he just landed in Kumasi about 15-20 minutes ago to attend to business in the Ashanti region on behalf of the state. This is not a president who is relaxed that he's won a second term and therefore yinti ubia. We saw presidents who in their first term adopted that kind of attitude. But we are at a point, I agree, where the natural attempt to position oneself in a place so that it could be considered as a successor are beginning to show their heads. The party had to be very strong in the Ashanti Regional Congress preparations to say, no, we are not going to tolerate this. If you don't take it down, we'll take it down for you. And I think we can commend the party for being so bold and so clear in that enterprise. The party which gives birth to the government needs to instill a lot of discipline among particularly senior members of the party, because if not checked, it can compromise the bigger party agenda. I travel across the country. Grassroots of the party are quite clear that they don't want a rank-cross exercise when that time comes. We don't think we are there yet. We've just finished the first year. We've got about 2 more years before we get to the consideration. And I think one of the two most important things that will determine who our flag bearer is how well this administration performs and how well those who are interested function in their roles.
So that you can break the age.
If this administration is not supported to perform well, nobody cares about your presidential ambition, because then we are all going down. So you have to be interested in helping us perform well, and you have to handle your portfolio well.
Akufo-Addo is known to be the legacy man. He wants to leave legacy. So he's left free SHS and so on. In his final term, what are some of the key things you know that he's really excited about pushing, so that when he leaves, in 20 years, people will say it was Akufo-Addo who left this for us?
I think I can, off the top of my head, count about 4 things. Anytime I talk to him, education is a big deal. The difference between many people has been education. He's keen on that. He's very keen on putting a strong healthcare system in place. He's keen on getting the Ghanaian economy to a certain level where it will be cruising by building a lot of entrepreneurs through YouStart, 1D1F, etc. And he's also keen on putting Ghana in its rightful place on the West African, and global landscape. So you see what he's doing with African Continental Free Trade Area, with ECOWAS, and with a lot of the international platforms where he tries to put Ghana in its right place.
Does he not worry about the jostling for his replacements? Does it not give him a headache? Does it not bother him? Especially when people are in his government who want to.
He's appreciative of how it can affect the performance of his government. And I believe he won't be upset if I say this clearly, where he has had occasion to speak up about it, at cabinet meetings and say that he does not expect anybody to be derailed by that. If you have the view that you cannot function 100% focusing on the job, maybe you should let him know and take a back seat because he wants full attention on the job.
Is he going to have a policy where if you want to run for president, you quit his government, or he's going to fire them?
I can't read his mind on that yet, but he's been very clear that he wants everybody focused on the job.
Is Kojo Oppong Nkrumah going to be one of the people jostling for president?
Of course, he be MP, village MP.
But we know the matter.
Oh, please, I beg you.
Mahama came from Bole, his father from Accra.
Don't even go there. There are big people in this system.
Came from Golu.
There are big people in this system. I am not part of them.
You have not reached that level
I
yet.
am not part of them. Let me sit and chop my small minister like that.
When you chop with president, you give me minister for information.
I beg you. Don't lead me to harm's way.
Honorable Minister for Information, Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, thank you for speaking.
Sanda, Happy New Year.
I appreciate it. This is how we end face-to-face this edition. My name is Umaru Sanda Amadu. Please stay with Citi TV. It's your world.